But yeah, we got a few fan views on this one. So do you want to start with Mark Butler?
No, I think you should, because then I can do the comment that's aimed at you.
Oh, right, okay. Mark Butler said, how's someone working from home supposed to get stuff done when you've got a fun-packed game like this on? Perhaps you can never write off the storm could be a new TV catchphrase. If you're a misery guts, i.e. a British Rugby League fan, you could point out just how many points came from howlers, but let's start enjoying ourselves.
Nice. And then David Hunter said, that was the craziest game I've ever seen. And then he says, P.S. for Mark, please listen to my latest podcast episode that relates to Wigan. Hypothetic RL, episode 8. Everyone's Wigan out. Hope you enjoy.
Yeah, it was a crazy game. But the big takeaway from this comment is that David's part of the Rugby League podcasting world, and I didn't know this before. I must admit, David, and I apologise, I'd missed the emergence of your podcast in May this year.
But did we really know David in May this year?
Well, that's the thing. I think he's certainly become a much more active part of our show, hasn't he, in the last 3 or 4 weeks? And now we get to share our podcasting hobby with him as well.
Mm.
So I have listened to episode 8 of Hypothetic RL. Right, how do you actually spell? Because now I've been reading the way he spelt it for his show, and I'll explain why he spelt it not the normal way. But how do you actually spell hypothetic?
HYPOTHETIC.
Yes, that's right. It's an O.
Yeah.
But he, instead of spelling it hypothetical, he spells it hyperthetic, and his reasoning for this that he explains on his show is that he kind of goes a little bit beyond a hypothetical. He kind of takes basically his show is a sideways look at rugby league history, and he takes an event or a period and then says, what if it had gone differently? But sometimes, to make it more dramatic, he stretches the what if situation. Like the particular episode he mentioned, the Wigan episode that came out this week. He talks about what if Wigan hadn't got promoted back to the First Division in 1981, but then he says, and let's assume they stayed in the bottom division for like 3 or 4 years after as well. So it was
Yeah, good plan.
We know you're on board of it. You think we wouldn't have been able to steal all that money from you?
Exactly. Well, yeah.
Anyway, so that's kind of where the hyper element comes into it, because I think it in rugby league it's always been unrealistic that most teams that get relegated aren't a favourite to get promoted the next year. But even more so back then, when it was like 3 or 4 teams each year would swap divisions, wouldn't they? So, with all the different scenarios we've had of league structures, I think at that time was it 3 teams that went up and went down?
I only remember it in the days of 2.
So anyway, yeah. I listened to a few of his other episodes as well. Like I say, I'd describe it as a sort of one man's sideways look at history. It's quite interesting, that he plays through a few scenarios. Up to now, the first 7 episodes, the first 6 episodes, and the intro and the first 6 episodes have been more NRL focused, but episode 8 is the first time he sort of looked at the British game, and I think he's actually looking for suggestions. So hypothetic RL on Twitter, HYPERTHETICRL on Twitter is where you can send your suggestions for other things. So David, we know you'll be listening, so one of my suggestions that I was thinking about whilst I was listening to one of your episodes driving home from work today was, what if Danny Addy's kick had just gone over rather than just missing in the first £1 million game?
Ooh.
Yeah. What would have happened for Bradford and Wakefield at that point in the different trajectories they might have gone on? So there's one to get you going from a Super League, Northern Hemisphere Rugby League perspective. But yeah, I'll be in touch outside of this, but let's get back to the game, I think. Alan Walker said, does it get much better? Inside 10 minutes, Joey says this is shaping to be a classic. Gus says it's Origin-like. Those two... How's he listening to their commentary? We get the Sky... We don't get that Channel 9 commentary, do we?
No, must be something dodgy going on in France.
It says, those two know their onions, hard and fast, plenty of errors, but caused by strong pressure. At the death, Queensland's finest, in brackets only good, team, edged a top-class thriller. Smith's so good he can ref a game at 7 as well as he can at 9. Class, respect to the Chucks. Storm would have put on 50 against any other team. Yeah, I mean, Sarah, this was one of those games that's played with, almost that grand final intensity.
Mm-hmm.
Both sides were incredibly fast. I would say, and Mark's touched on, there's howlers in the game. I would say that a lot of the Storm's points came from Roosters' gifts, which kind of goes to say how close this game was, how good the Roosters still are, and there's no reason to panic if you're a Roosters fan about this. But at the end of this game was so exciting one way and then another that you thought who was going to win this game. I mean,
yeah.
Keary scored his drop goal with 40 seconds left. You thought that was it, but the Storm went up the other end and Pappenhausen came out of nowhere to kick a massive drop goal too to tie it up and send it to Golden Point. It was absolutely thrilling.
I might try and watch it then.
I mean, there was some good bits in there as well. More brilliance from one of the Morrises, or maybe both in some aspects of this game. They both got on the try scores. I think it took them to a milestone combined tries. Bless them, they're never going to get separated from each other, apart from that one season every 3 seasons that they play for different teams.
Yeah.
And it was a really good side, and it felt like there's no real weak links in either of the sides, although I do think the Storm did look more organised when Riley Jacks came on and Cameron Smith was able to actually move back into hooker. I do think Brandon Smith, for all his try-poaching brilliance and all the ways that he is, I do think he's a bit less controlled and a bit more impetuous than Cameron Smith, and I just think having 2 half-backs back in there did improve things for them more in the second half, was my take on it. But just star players across the board delivering in this game, really exciting one to watch.
Good stuff. It finished the Raiders 22, the Dragons 16, and we had a decent number of Brits over there playing. Williams with 1 try assist, Sutton 141 metres, Josh Hodgson 51 tackles, and Whitehead played.
Yeah, and it's a bit harsh on Elliot Whitehead that he didn't hit any of the sort of stat marks in this game, but he played really well, then got injured, and then kind of missed a bit of the game. But when it looked like the Dragons were going to get back into it, because the Raiders are not the Raiders that smashed the Storm 5 weeks ago at the moment, they're just not that side, then he came back on pretty injured but shored things up. So every credit to Elliot Whitehead, really, even though his stats didn't get any special mention there. Mark Butler got in touch. He said, Georgie, Porgie, Pudding and Pie dropped his shoulder and scored a try. When the Dragons started to play, it was too late to save the day. And then he says, let's not pretend we'll talk about anything but George Williams sending a hapless opponent for a hot dog this week. Well, we can talk about how George Williams arguably right now has the best creative short kicking game in the NRL, because he set up another try with a brilliant kick in this match, but also scored a try of his own. Brilliant piece of running play. He spotted that there was an opportunity, dropped his shoulder and ran through untouched. But I would say we're still not seeing what we need to see out of the Raiders. They made quite a few changes for this game. I think some of them were broadly positive, with Curtis Scott getting pushed down to the bench after he'd had a bit of a nightmare last week, and Rapana not playing, I think through injury, but either way. But there was a serious injury. There was some serious knocks in the game. Sia Soliola, have you seen the pictures, Sarah, on social media of Sia Soliola's face cracked into?
No.
So he shared an X-ray of his skull, and basically he's got a fracture that runs right across the middle of his face underneath his nose from one side to the other. Like, it's not his mouth; it's then got a mouth as well.
Oh.
Yeah, it's pretty horrific. And like I say, Elliot White had picked up an injury but was able to come back on. It was a bit patchy in that sense from the Raiders, and they put Papali on the bench and Tapane on the bench to kind of rest them a bit, I suppose. But because of injuries, they had to play a bit more than they might have intended to, because the Dragons were never going to be the equal this side. But Matt Duffy did have a few good moments. They probably scored the try of the game, arguably, and Lomax's try as well, to make it interesting. But it never felt like they were quite good enough to match a lacklustre Raiders.
Yeah.
On to your Parramatta Eels, Sarah. They won 42 points to 4 against the hapless, miserable North Queensland Cowboys. Karsten got in touch first, so I'll do Karsten's and you can do David's.
Okay.
Karsten, from the Cowboys' perspective, said, "We were shit. Our attack was shit. Our defence was shit." Did I mention that we were shit?
I'm not sure you did, Karsten.
Can we have the COVID break back, please? I mean, that was the last time they were in form, when they were not losing games, when they weren't playing them.
Yeah, and David Hunter said, "Another dominant performance by the boys," and Sivo, 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 Sivo.
Yeah, I didn't watch this game, but from what I can gather, Maika Sivo had a pretty good game. He scored 4 tries.
Adequate, really.
It's acceptable, isn't it? As a performance.
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, 4 tries was enough to beat the Cowboys.
4 points was enough to tie the Cowboys, so...
Yeah.
The Cowboys really have no defence at the moment, and it must be worrying for people like Karsten. But the Eels are an exciting
But not
team.
too worrying, because they don't have any relegation.
Not worrying from that perspective, no, but, you know, no one likes to see the team lose. I think the Eels, though, keep rolling on. You guys didn't get to watch this one, but you'd have thought maybe without Mitchell Moses it wouldn't have been quite so comfortable, but obviously it didn't matter.
No, it was a very good result. I always think if you get over 40, that's a good score, isn't it? Whoever you're playing.
Yeah, no matter what form your opponent in, you've delivered all you needed to deliver on the scoreline like that. And another team who delivered pretty handsomely on the scoreboard in a game that I have no idea what happened in, other than that the Sharks smashed the Titans. Another absolute embarrassment for a Queensland side, and it was 40 points to 10 in favour of the visiting Sharks.
Yeah, I must admit, I did see some of this. Slight medication mishap meant that I was awake very early on Saturday morning. And at half-time, I think it was 12-10 to the Sharks. So, you know, it was all to play for, really. And then the Sharks came out, and it's questionable whether the Titans really did. There were some nice lines run, but reading of the defensive reading was shocking. Really was. The attackers were able to just step through at will, really. And, you know, and in number as well, even quite close to the line, you know, you had a nice line being run, but there were still 2 players in support, and that's when they were going in from 10 metres out. So, defensively, I think the Titans have really got to worry. But again, there were quite a lot of injuries during that second half, particularly knee injuries. So I don't know whether that's to do with, you know, maybe starting the season and then stopping, and then we've started again and we've got to a particular point, or whether it was just sort of a bit freaky in that match.
Yeah, because, I mean, you can't say that some of these leg injuries are being caused by the surface in a game like this, where it should have been fine there. It's been doing is getting prepared for action, hasn't it, at Cbus? And so it is interesting. Bryson Goodwin on the score sheet for a second NRL game in a row for the Sharks. So that's
Yeah, I did a complete double take. I hadn't realised he was there, to be honest.
Well, no, he only went there last week and is banging and
right.
for him.
Yeah.